You know, when you think about it, most of the choices we make each day, they're not really choices at all. They're habits. And these automatic behaviors, well, they shape pretty much everything about our lives. Today, we're going to dive into the hidden science of our daily routines to really understand how they work and, more importantly, how we can change them. So let's start with this really wild puzzle that had neuroscientists scratching their heads for years. Imagine a man whose memory is basically wiped clean every single minute. How could someone like that possibly learn anything new? Well, the answer to that question unlocks the entire secret of habits. Okay, so our journey to figure this out starts with the truly remarkable case of one patient. This is Eugene Pauly. He suffered this tragic illness that left him with profound amnesia. I mean, he couldn't remember his doctor's name, even after meeting him dozens and dozens of times. He didn't know his own age. You could ask him a question, he'd give you a great, thoughtful answer. And then boom, 30 seconds later, he'd have absolutely no memory of ever talking to you. But here's where it gets really weird, right? This is the paradox. Eugene couldn't draw you a map of his own house. He couldn't even point to where the kitchen was. But if he got hungry, he could walk right to it. He couldn't map out his neighborhood, but he could take a walk around the block and find his own front door every single time. Something else was guiding him. So what was going on? Well, that something else was a part of his brain called the basal ganglia. See, while the virus had completely wrecked his memory centers, this primitive, really powerful part of his brain was perfectly fine. And that's the part that runs on autopilot. It's where our habits are stored. Eugene wasn't remembering his walk. He was just automatically running a program. Okay, so we know where habits live. But how do they actually get built? How does the brain create these automatic routines in the first place? Just think about backing your car out of the driveway. The very first time you did it, you had to focus on every little thing. Now, I bet you can do it while planning your day. That's a habit in a nutshell. It's a behavior that started out as a choice, and then your brain handed it over to the autopilot system to save some mental energy. And scientists at MIT really cracked the code on this by, of all things, studying rats in a maze looking for chocolate. They literally watched the rats' brain activity. At first, their brains were firing like crazy as they learned the maze. But once the route became a habit, their brains quieted right down. They had found a clear neurological pattern. And that pattern is a surprisingly simple 3-step loop. First, you've got a cue. That's the trigger. For the rat, it was a click sound. For you, it might be your alarm clock going off. Second is the routine. That's the behavior. And third, the reward, which is the prize that tells your brain, hey, that was good. Let's remember this loop for later. So here's the big takeaway. The whole reason this loop exists is to let our conscious minds take a break. Your brain is a total efficiency nut. By bundling behaviors into these automatic routines, it frees up brain power for other stuff, like figuring out what you're going to have for dinner while you're driving home from work. Okay, this is all super interesting, but what's the point, right? What does it mean for us? If these habits are so baked into our brains, can we actually change the ones we don't like? The answer is yes, and it lies in this really powerful strategy for rewiring these loops. This right here, this is maybe the single most important rule to understand. You can't just erase a bad habit. The wiring in your brain is just too strong. What you have to do is hijack the existing loop and swap in a new routine. Let's walk through an example. Let's say every day around 3 p.m., you get that afternoon slump. That's your cue. Your routine is to go grab a cookie from the cafeteria. But is the cookie the real reward, or is it the 5-minute break and chatting with people that you're actually craving? If the reward is the social break, you can keep the cue, the 3 p.m. slump, and the reward, but just change the routine. Instead of getting a cookie, go chat with a coworker for a few minutes. So you see, the real trick is you have to become a detective of your own behavior. You've got to figure out what craving you're really trying to satisfy. Once you know the real cue and the real reward, you can consciously design a better routine that gives you that same awesome payoff. All right, now let's level up, because it turns out not all habits are created equal. Some are way, way more powerful than others. They have this amazing ability to cause a massive, positive cascade of change through your whole life, or even an entire company. So check this out. Back in 1987, this guy Paul O'Neill becomes the new CEO of the aluminum giant Alcoa, which was struggling at the time. He gets up in front of all these Wall Street investors, and he completely ignores profits. Instead, he says he's going to focus on just one thing: worker safety. The room was just stunned. Everybody thought he was nuts. But he was dead serious. This wasn't just some nice-sounding corporate goal. For him, it was the foundation for totally transforming the company's culture. He knew you can't just order people to be better. You have to give them one central, powerful habit to rally around. What O'Neill had zeroed in on is what we now call a keystone habit. These are the big ones. When they change, they set off this chain reaction that reshapes everything else. A classic example is making your bed every morning. It's a small win that somehow leads to a cleaner room, and then a more productive day. For Alcoa, safety was their keystone. And focusing on that one thing started this unbelievable ripple effect. I mean, to get to 0 injuries, different departments had to communicate way better. When people started talking about safety, they also started talking about how to make production better. Quality shot up, costs plummeted. And as a result, profits went through the roof. And it all started with that one focus on safety. And the results? I mean, they were just staggering. By focusing on this single keystone habit, Paul O'Neill didn't just make Alcoa one of the safest companies on the planet, he also sent its stock price soaring by 200%. That's the incredible power of finding the right habit to change. Okay, so let's bring all this home, back to you and me. Because understanding the science is cool, but the real power comes when you realize that your habits are ultimately under your control. You know, more than 100 years ago, the philosopher William James said something really profound. He said that our lives, when you boil it all down, are just a mass of habits. These little daily routines, all organized together, are what carry us toward our destiny, for good or for bad. And that leads us to the most empowering idea in all of this. The change, it starts with belief. You have to actually believe that you can change. In fact, that belief can become the very first habit you build. The keystone habit that makes every other change feel like it's finally within your grasp. So once you really get that habits can be rebuilt, the question isn't can I change anymore, it's who do I want to become? So as we wrap up, I want to leave you with this question. If you could pick just one keystone habit to tackle in your own life, what would it be?